Yo,
Godfrey,
what's up?
you're on the podcast.
Oh, hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I'm sorry. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, I wanted to talk to you because we have Paul Michael Glaser on the podcast today. What are some of your favorite
Get
Starsky?
the hell out of here.
Paul Michael fucking Glaser's on the podcast.
No, what? Starsky? David Starsky?
Yes.
What the fuck, man?
Do you remember watching Starsky and Hutch as a kid?
Hell yeah. Everybody wanted a Gran Torino, man. And we all wanted to be able to slide off a car the way Starsky would do it. You know what I mean?
What jacket would you wear? Would you wear the white?
I wanted the sweater. I want that sweater.
Not the Hutch.
I wanted the sweater. I want the sweater. Nah, the David Starsky sweater. That white sweater that they did in the pilot where they come out of the swimming pool all wet and stuff. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Is he there?
No, he's not here right now. I'm just doing the intro.
Yes.
But we've had many talks about Starsky and Hutch.
But I wanted to look like Hutch too, because Hutch dressed cool. He had the dope leather jackets. He was dope as hell. David Soul, and had the coolest name too.
Soul.
David Soul, and he sang. You know, he was a singer.
Yeah, he had a hit in the 70s. I forgot the name of the song.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a theater background, and they got casted in that from theater.
Yeah. Paul Michael Glaser was on Kojak.
He was on the Waltons, Kojak, Cannon,
yeah.
Streets of San Francisco.
Before they got their stuff, man, they put their work in. They put their time in.
What do you think the greatest duo of all time? Was it Starsky and Hutch? Was it Bo and Luke? Was it Riggs and Murtaugh?
It was Starsky and Hutch for cops.
For cops.
Starsky and Hutch, man. There's Hardcastle and McCormick. There's what's it? Cagney and Lacey. There's, man. 10 Speed and Brown Shoe. That was Ben Vereen and Jeff Goldblum.
What show was that?
That was a show. It was a short-lived show on ABC. It had like 1 or 2 seasons. 10 Speed and Brown Shoe.
I vaguely remember that. I do remember that.
I know, because that's how fast it got canceled. That's what the title of the show should have been called. I vaguely remember that.
What was a better Starsky and Hutch intro? Because I'm going to play it right after this.
I think the first one.
There was season 1, then season 2, then season 3.
Yeah. They were all really. I thought they were pretty damn good, but it was it might be the second season. But the first and second ones were the best ones.
Yeah, second and third, I believe, because it went 4 seasons.
It was like a lot of piano. And the other one was like at the beginning. That was the first one. And then they show Starsky running through the stairways. You know, they have Starsky when he's running through the stairways. He's running and he hits the wall.
He's
running down the stairs. Oh, it's so amazing. And then David Soul jumps on the top of the car. That's the greatest opening ever.
First, he wipes the window and looks in with the sunglasses on.
With his sunglasses, right. And then I don't know what stuntman did that move where he jumps out and lands on the top of the car.
Yeah.
And then then the Chiron goes David Soul and he's yelling and he's throwing something.
Yeah, he's wearing the yellow jacket. Then Starsky comes running around the corner with the gun. He points it up top.
And he goes, freeze, yeah. And it goes, Paul Michael Glaser. And then it says Bernie Hamilton and Antonio Fargas.
Bernie Hamilton was the original black angry chief.
Oh, yeah. Right. He was the original black angry lieutenant.
He constantly wanted to yank people off. They said, "No, Give
me your badge, Starsky." What are you talking about? Give me your badge.
You're off the case.
You're off the case. Dang it.
I'm putting you 2 clowns together. I don't want to work with this guy.
You know what I mean?
So you think they were better than Riggs and Murtaugh?
Yeah, man. You can't mess with Starsky and Hutch, boy. Why do you think Ben Stiller did a remake? He didn't do a remake of that other shit. And the Dukes of Hazzard was just a hillbilly version of them.
Oh, I brought that up to Paul Michael Glaser. I go, what was the better car duo? And he said Starsky and Hutch.
Starsky and Hutch was like they came close because they were hillbillies, but Tom Wopat, John Schneider were just David Soul and Paul Michael Glaser, but hillbillies.
But even though that Confederate flag stands for racism and all kinds of stuff, you got to admit that was a cool looking car.
Well, it's a little weird when you have two black kids, me and my brother, asking for a General Lee. And we called it the X car. We didn't know. Isn't X for the unknown? I don't know.
But as a kid, I didn't know what that flag meant. It looked cool.
What'd you say?
When I was a kid, it looked cool. I didn't know what the flag meant. I knew nothing. I was just...
It looked amazing. I was like, wow. And they literally were showing a racist flag in front of us.
Dude, I was just in Charlotte, and they have Confederate flags floating everywhere. They're just like on people's porches. They're everywhere.
Yeah, well, that's racism's everywhere.
I just like touching on racism with you because I know you usually have a comment.
Oh, I always do. I try my best to avoid it, but it just seems to follow me everywhere I go. They're called the police.
Oh, hey, by the way, Swartzen says what's up. I'm with him in Columbus.
Oh, tell him I said what's up.
He says he loves Godfrey. So
tell him whenever you see Swartzen, go booty.
Booty?
Yeah, go booty.
All right, I'll see him in about an hour.
Sing it like that, booty.
I'll say it in 1 hour when I see him.
That's what he's going to say. He's going booty. He always sings it when he sees me, booty.
Were you in Denver?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, how are the shows?
Very good. I'm eating at a Native American restaurant.
Oh, did you work out with that professional bodybuilder?
No, his wife is sick this week, man.
Oh, okay.
She has like breast surgery, some weird shit. I was like, oh, damn. He said, man, if I can try and hang out, man. But it's like my wife got real sick. I was like, damn.
Well, that's a perfect lead into Paul Michael Glaser because never mind. That's so bad.
So what other questions?
No, I knew if I was going to do the Starsky and Hutch intro, the Paul Michael, I had to have you on there because I've had so many great conversations. We have such an affection for that show.
What's amazing about Bernie Hamilton was the first cop on Sanford and Son before the other guy.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
He was a black cop?
He was a black cop with yeah. He was on Sanford and Son. Remember the cops that always come in?
Oh, was it the white dude like Gravy?
There was a white dude and there was a black cop. There were two white guys, two black cops. Well, and the black cop was the father from 227.
Well, the one white cop, he was always trying to be cool. He's like, groovy, man, groovy.
Yeah, right. He said, all right, we got a crack. No, that's split.
yeah.
Well, there was a guy before him, though. Before that white guy, Hoppy, was a guy before him. Then he was replaced, and then Bernie was a black dude, and then he got replaced by Hal, whatever you call it, from 227.
So where did Antonio Fargas come from? Did you see him bouncing around shows in the 70s?
Antonio Fargas was on Sanford and Son, too. He played a lawyer.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
I know they brought him back, and I'm going to get you, sucker, where he played the pimp.
Mm-hmm. So Antonio Fargas was on Sanford and Son and all that other stuff, you know?
They just rotated people in and out in those shows in the early 70s.
Yeah, because they were all, it's like us now. They rotate the same people.
Yeah, except now it's like, fucking...
And there were fewer channels back then.
That's when TV mattered.
Mm-hmm.
Because all eyes were on those shows. Like Starsky and Hutch was only on for 4 seasons, but in 2020, people still know what it is.
Yeah, that was. They were good. They were good episodes.
Yeah. Well, listen, I can't think of a better person to do this intro with, and I appreciate you. When are you going to be? When's your tour dates coming up? This is coming out on Tuesday.
Well, it's coming out on Tuesday. Well, I'll be at the Ontario Improv coming up. March 12th through the 15th, Ontario Improv in California.
Yeah, I was supposed to be with you.
Ah, damn.
Oh,
And
damn.
my podcast is in Godfrey We Trust on the Gas Digital Network. Subscribe with promo code Godfrey.
Hit subscribe. I can't think of a better entertaining person that I ever met in my entire life than Godfrey. Thank you, Godfrey, for taking time out.
Thanks. Right on.
I'll let you get back to lunch.
All right. Later.
All right, that was Godfrey, everybody. He's on the Lawson's Chip Tip hotline. You know, when we're on the road, Godfrey and I, we go in these loopholes of watching old 70s cop shows and talking about them, and we both have this affection for Starsky and Hutch. And, you know, like I think I say at the end of the podcast, when I was a young boy, like barely like 3, 2, I could barely speak. I would sit on my grandfather's lap, and I would watch these shows like Starsky and Hutch, Hogan's Heroes with him. And I remember my first early words, according to my mother, was I called Starsky and Hutch stick and starch. So for me to have a nice conversation with a guy who has been kind of a role model in my life, because I grew up loving and Starsky. Like even when I was in high school, I would watch old reruns. To this day, in my 40s, I am a Starsky and Hutch fan, and what a pleasure it is for me to speak to Paul Michael Glaser. So without further ado, we're going to play Season 2's theme of Starsky and Hutch. Then we're going to close it out with the final season. Here's my conversation with the great Paul Michael Glaser. That's a wrap. All right, joining us on the show right now is actor, director, and artist, my childhood hero, Paul Michael Glaser. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Now, before we get into your project for the Chicago Art Proposal, and you can go see all of Paul's work, all his work that he's working on right now, you can go to pnglazerart.com. I kind of want to go in somewhat of a chronological order of how you got started in the business. I know you got a master's degree in fine arts at Boston University. Did you always want to get into acting and performing?
I think when I was a kid, I have two older sisters, and the middle child, we used to do an awful lot of creative things together, and she wanted to be an actress, and I have a feeling that I wanted to emulate her. That's as far back as it goes.
So you wanted to impress your sister is basically how you got in a career of iconic career of performing arts.
I don't know if I wanted to impress her so much as I just I felt like it was a cool thing to do. But anyways, that's the beginning, the very beginning.
I hope that you showed her. I hope she's impressed by what you have done over the course of your work.
Well, I think she's very supportive. I think so.
So when you graduate college, where do you go from there? Do you move to Los Angeles, New York? Like, how do you get started in the business?
Well, I went to graduate school for a few semesters. And then when I finished there, I went to New York City, and I got jobs waiting on table, and then eventually became a bartender, and, I made the rounds, and, worked my way up from off-Broadway to off-Broadway to Broadway. I was doing a soap opera simultaneously with the Broadway show I was doing, and like that.
And then from Broadway, you kind of landed in some iconic TV shows. And I like to say that it's when TV was important. There was only 3 major networks. You're doing the Waltons, Kojak, Rockford Files, Streets of San, just iconic shows. At the time when you're doing these shows, do you realize the important impact it's going to have on society?
No, you don't realize that. You don't. It's a job, and you're doing a job.
So how do you land the iconic role of David Starsky in Starsky and Hutch? How's that come about?
Well, Spelling and Goldberg, the producers, have been after me for a while to do since I did the film, The Fiddler on the Roof, they were after me to do a series. I didn't want to do a series. And then I read a pilot for a 2-hour movie for television called Starsky and Hutch, and I read it and I thought, well, this'll never make it to success. So, and I'd like to try some new techniques I have in front of the camera. I'd like to see how quiet I can be in front of the camera. And so I said yes to it, and it became a hit. Surprise, surprise.
Who get casted first, you or David Soul? Or were they both?
David got cast first.
Did you know him prior to that?
Yes, I did. Our paths had crossed several times. You know, we knew each other, said hello to each other.
Starsky and Hutch was on the air for 4 years, but during that time, like 2020, it's still relevant. It's still talked about. In fact, I don't know if you know, you don't know this at all, but one of my first words was stick and starch because my grandfather was such a big Starsky and Hutch fan, and I couldn't pronounce Starsky and Hutch.
That's funny.
But how do I mean, at the time, during when, like I said, 3 major networks, and you're all over the place on TV Guide, and you get fame. I mean, how do you handle that, and how does that like become a thing for you and your family?
I don't think I handled it very well. I think you know it's you don't realize what a deal with the devil you're making when you aim for celebrity. And the joke I used to tell, I still tell, when I was in New York and drinking my unemployment check on Friday nights with the other actors, and we'd all sit around and we'd say, I wouldn't go to Hollywood. I'll do a gig. I'll go out there to do a gig, but I wouldn't move down. I'm an artist. I'm going to work here. I'm an actor. I'm going to work on the theater, and I'm going to do some film. And when Norman Jewison came into town, and I met him, and he decided he wanted to fly me out to the coast to do a screen test for Fiddler. The very first thing I did was I went down to Bally's shoe store, and I bought a pair of white loafers. And I tell that story on myself because for years, I don't think I really recognized the part of me that erroneously believed that becoming a celebrity or becoming famous would complete me somehow. It doesn't. It doesn't do anything like that. But it certainly gives you a challenge in terms of where you go and how you proceed after that.
And I also wanted to touch on this just because I have this opportunity. I know a lot of my listeners are pop culture listeners. We have a lot of iconic actors and musicians and athletes throughout the years. But Starsky and Hutch, I really do believe it was the prototype of the buddy cop movie. I think it was the quintessential, like from the 70s on forward, everyone started to kind of copy that formula. The cool car, the blonde hair, the dark hair. You can even go to Dukes of Hazzard, to Riptide. It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, I think that that's true. I think that if I had to point at what I thought made Starsky and Hutch work really well, it would be number one, the chemistry between David and I. We to this day we have a very tight relationship, and all its intricacies. I mean, it wasn't just all a walk in the park. It It was an interesting, a very intense relationship. And Bill Blinn, who created the show, his particular sense of humor, if you will, in terms of what kind of characters lived in this world of Starsky and Hutch. I think that and David and I both came from the theater, so the attitude at the time when you had a commercial hit in television was, if you do 2 good shows out of 23, you're lucky. And David's and my attitude was, if we do 2 bad shows out of 23, we have to live with it. And so we were always kind of locking horns with the producers and the network, trying to create a better quality of script.
You actually, is that the first time you stepped behind the camera during Starsky and Hutch?
Yeah, well, I directed in graduate school, but I hadn't directed camera, and so after the first year, I realized that TV series was not going to completely fill my bill in terms of being creatively satisfied, and so I decided I wanted to learn how to direct. So I started directing the show.
So do you go to Aaron Spelling? You're like, I want to direct an episode, and he's like, all right, whatever.
No, no. It was a bit of a wrestling match, but I eventually, got to do what I wanted to do.
Now, I wrote an article a couple years ago for a website, and it was more of an amusing article about the top 10 runners in Hollywood. And I put you at number 1, Mel Gibson at number 2, and the guy who played Terminator 2, Robert Patrick, at 3. You were an incredible runner.
Isn't that funny? That is so funny that you say that. I was just talking to somebody the other day about an old friend, goes back to when we were kids, and I was the second fastest kid in the group until the first fastest kid had some health issues, and then I became the fastest runner in the group. I never thought so much about that I was fast, but I could crank it up there for a while.
Yeah, there was something about David Starsky. He was always running. He was the original Forrest Gump.
Yeah. Well, so much of one of my heroes in the world of performance was Cary Grant.
Oh yeah,
because he had such impeccable timing, and I called it dancing on a bubble. He just was great to watch in terms of his timing and his delivery, and so and it was like watching a dancer, and so I danced a lot at Starsky, the way I used the gun, the way I moved, the way I interacted with objects like telephones and things like that. I don't know. It became a real interesting way to interpret a character.
Well, as a viewer and as somebody who has grown up with you, you guys are both from, like you said, the theater, but you guys ultimately became some of the coolest people of all time, like coolest icons, just visually cool jackets, shoes, car. It just still sticks out to this day.
Really? Well, that's interesting. My choices for clothing were very simple. When the show was picked up to become a series, I told wardrobe, I said, I just want to have something I'm really comfortable with. I'm really comfortable in. I want to be able to sit down on the set, put my feet up on the desk, and just relax. I don't want to wear anything else but that. So, David was more of the clothes horse, and I just kind of, wore my jeans and my shoes and my, a couple of different jackets, that sweater, and that kind of thing.
So, the irony of the running is you go to 1987, you direct The Running Man, which is also a phenomenal film. How's that come about, and did you realize that's going to become a cult classic when you were doing it?
No, I didn't realize it was going to be called classic, although I was developing I was developing a script that was along similar lines, not the same, but similar. And Rob Cohn, who was the producer of that for TriStar, he had approached me. I had already directed my first feature, which was called Band of the Hand, which is kind of a mini cult classic now.
Yeah, I know Band of the Hand.
Yeah, and Rob approached me and asked me if I was interested in directing Running Man, and I said, how much time do you have to prepare? And they said, about 2.5 months. I said, that's not enough time, thank you, because I'd had my head handed to me on Band of the Hand. I didn't know the importance of a director's impact on pre-production and on the planning of a film, and so I wanted to be very careful this time out, and so I turned it down. And then 2 weeks into filming, they were a couple of weeks behind. They, there's an old saying that I always thought of, that in any film or any production, in the first 2 weeks, a head must roll. Somebody's going to get fired. And a lot of times it's totally irrational. It's just, the higher-ups they get the jitters, and they feel like they want to feel like they have the ability to assert some kind of control. And so they, pick the least likable target, and they go after it. So anyways, they fired the director, and they came back to me, and they asked me how long. They asked me if I'd take over the film. It was on a Thursday. And I said, well, how long were you shut down for? And they said, the weekend. But it was kind of a win-win situation, because even though they were behind schedule and over budget, they had a fantastic producer, Tim Zinnemann, and he really set up a well-constructed production. And so if I came in and I saved the film and I made it work and blah, 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 then I'd get the credit. And if I didn't, then the last director would get the blame.
Well, you ended up getting the credit. So was the film already casted with Schwarzenegger, Dawson, Ventura, Jim Brown?
Yeah. No, it was all cast. And I basically came in to, in television, when you learn to direct in television, you really learn to be to think on your feet, to be a problem solver, and so I was pretty good at that. And so my first objective, the first month of filming was basically just to try to get the film back on track, and and then I had to redesign a few elements and just find creative ways to get the thing done. But as I said, Tim Zinnemann had basically set up a wonderful production.
Well, the film's iconic. I mean, I really do believe. I think I stole it from the video store and I just kept it.
Yeah, it definitely was. It was very interesting.
Now, again, before we get to your art, I want to just touch on a couple of things. Then you direct a lot of things, and you direct a couple episodes of Miami Vice, and one of the legendary episodes, Smuggler's Blues with Glenn Frey, and that became one of the iconic Miami Vice episodes. But you're going back into this world of buddy cop, and you were kind of the architecture of that.
Well, Michael Mann, who's the producer of Miami Vice, Michael had been a writer on our staff at Starsky Hutch.
Michael Mann was a writer?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
He was a writer on Starsky Hutch. And so when he broke off and he was starting to, move, he did a TV movie, which was a big success. And so he was doing a series. And we sat down and had lunch, and he asked me if I'd like to direct a couple episodes. I said, sure. And that happened before, because Michael Mann also produced Band of the Hand.
Oh, okay.
So I did 4 hours of Vice, and including Smuggler's Blues. And then Michael asked me if I'd be interested in directing that feature, Band of the Hand. So that's the chronology of it.
Ah, it's who you know in this business.
No. Well, I bet it is. We always like to think it's the quality of the work and the people involved, you know. And certainly when it comes to ourselves, we like to think that we've been hired because, you know, we were able to do the job. But I think part of what you say is very true.
Now, Paul, does your kids realize like how iconic you were? Like, are they just like, yeah, whatever, Dad?
My son realizes it. You know, my daughter probably realizes it too, but she is more of a yeah, whatever, Dad kind of attitude.
Right. They didn't realize the magnitude of you know, some of the work you've done and how big it was at the time. You know,
Well,
go ahead.
I don't realize it myself, so you know I can't expect them to realize it completely.
So you're jumping back and forth from the camera in front of the screen. You did Ray Donovan, and now you're an artist. I mean, you might have always been an artist. When did you start getting into that? When did that become a thing?
I was, you know, I'd written a screenplay. You know, when I was directing, please, oh, there it is. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, sir.
Okay, hold on. Let's get myself organized here. When what were we talking about?
How you got into becoming a solo artist.
Oh, yeah. So I was writing screenplays. And I wrote a screenplay that at the time there was no technology to make it. So I decided to write it as a book because it contained many of the lessons that I'd learned in my journey with my family, you know, my family.
Oh. Damn it.
So I written this book, and it had a lot of the lessons that I'd learned in my journey with my families, with AIDS and with HIV and all of that. And I'd learned a lot. I was extraordinarily lucky because I had been able to go from being a victim to finding some kind of opportunity in it to grow my own sense of empathy or capacity to love and forgive. And so I had learned all these lessons, and I thought, gee, I want to share these. So I wrote the screenplay. There was no technology, so I decided to write it as a book. I'd never written a book. I'd written a lot of prose, a lot of poetry, but I'd never written a book. So I sat down and I wrote this thing, and it took a while, but that became Crystalia and the Source of Light. And then I was between manuscripts on that book, and I was walking my daughter's dogs, and I happened to see a crow with a squished up foot. I thought, Hookfoot. And I went back and I wrote 30 pages how he got that name. And then the next day I saw a one-legged seagull, and I thought Pegleg. And I wrote the 30 pages on that. And then I had the two of them meet, and before I knew it, in between drafts of my first book, I ended up writing this second book. 300 pages of this relationship with these two birds and then a oversexed parrot who comes into their lives. And it was a very touching story and very humorous and all of that. I'd had a complicated issue with my illustrating of Crystalia. I didn't do the illustrations, but I wanted a certain look, and it took me a while to get it. So I was moaning about how I was going to find another illustrator, and my daughter said, "Dad, you should illustrate it." And me? Oh, geez. Okay, well, I'd done a lot of art as a kid, so, and I was off to do Fiddler on the Roof in England, a tour of England, Ireland, Scotland, and England. Fiddler. I was going to play Tevye. And so I took my sketch pad with me, and when I was over there, I'd sketch. And when I was bored with sketching illustrations, I'd sketch other things. And when I finished the tour, I had like a block of work, of incomplete work. It was this mountain of work, but I discovered that I really enjoyed being alone. In fact, I used to say, I finally found some way to be creative where I can disappear for 6 to 8 hours a day. That's the good news. The bad news is that I could disappear for 6 to 8 hours a day. But I started doing that, and so when I finally finished a block of about 80 pieces, I had some friends over, and I took out of the drawer, I took the second book, and I started to read it. They really liked it, and so I said, okay, here we go. And so I've been setting that up, but that was the springboard for me painting. And what had happened was, because I was traveling, I would photograph my sketches, and then I'd play with the color on various art programs, art apps on my iPad. And so I became more and more comfortable with doing it digital. It was easier. It was to play around with it. And when I came back to the States, I decided to continue to do that, which is a challenge in and of itself, because digital work tends to be what do we say, less textured or less opaque or less. It has a tendency to feel a little flat. But I discovered that there was a real interesting relationship between the electronic color of Photoshop and the graphite stroke of a pencil. And so I started to combine them. And that was really interesting for me. And so thereafter, I would have sketches, I'd have painted sketches, and then I'd just have full paintings. And maybe one of these days I'll pick myself up and try some acrylics or oils. Who knows?
Well, what's interesting about this is, as people get older, and including myself, you find different interests in different areas, and different things become a passion, and you don't let one thing define you. So I find this very interesting that this is your world now. This is something that consumes you, and this is something that you identify with and people identify you with.
Yeah, well, the thing that most attracted me about directing was that directing provided me so many outlets for my creativity. I could move a camera, I could photograph, I could design, I could play with color, I could play with music, I could play with sound, I could teach actors. It was an amazing venue to, as I say, for many outlets for my creativity. So it was it felt like a natural extension to find, to find myself drawing and writing.
Well, I'm going to try to make this connection right here because, like I was saying, people are known for things they've done, iconic things they've done. And we lost Kobe Bryant, the iconic basketball player, and he transitioned into a storyteller out of basketball. And he was doing, writing children's books. He had and then, we unfortunately lost him. And then they started painting murals all throughout Los Angeles, amazing murals of him and his daughter Gigi. And this leads me up to this connection that you're trying to propose a Chicago art proposal about your work being put on murals.
Well, I discovered that my instinct when I was creating a lot of my work was that I wanted it to be larger than smaller. And as long as, when you talk about being a storyteller, if I had to define myself as in any way through my many careers, it would be that I've always been a storyteller. So even my paintings, in terms of thematics or visuals or whatever, I try to either pose a question or tell some kind of a story that causes the viewer to become more involved in the piece and causes them to think a bit and feel a bit. So I discovered my pieces really worked well on large buildings. I played around with some images of buildings, and I photoshopped images of my art onto them. And so I was having a radio interview with somebody in Chicago. After the interview, I asked the interviewer if there was a city beautification program. He said, absolutely. He knew all about it. So I started a dialogue with him and through him with some others. And I put together this reel, or this proposal. And I put about, 5 or 6 of my pieces on buildings in Chicago, photographs of buildings. And, the thing that's fascinating to me is that the infrastructure of our country is in disrepair. It's crumbling. And cities need some beautification. And they need more than just, a graffiti or commercially oriented visuals on buildings and things like that. I mean, you have an opportunity here. We have these huge surfaces and these huge edifices which are visible from a distance away. To be able to put something up on there and go, wow, what is that? Oh, look at that. That's that. Have people, it gives them a sense of identification with their city. It colors their day. It gives them something more to talk about and to relate to in terms of where their environment and what they're about. So I think it's a canvas, if you will, that needs to be taken advantage of and is being taken advantage of in many cities now.
So would that mean more to you than one of your iconic roles or some of the things you've directed in the past to have your art on the side of a big building?
I don't think it's a question of meaning more to me. I mean, it's really interesting about success. We view it in retrospect with a lot different set of eyes than when we're in the middle of it. Oftentimes I've heard people say, and I believe it too, that success is the hardest thing to deal with. Failure is a lot easier. The problem with success is that once you're successful, you don't ever want to fail again. And the only way you get to be creative, to discover new things, is to be willing to fail. So, one can look back at history and go, oh, wow, we really knocked that out of the park with that series. But it didn't feel like it when we were doing it at the time. And we were just doing the best job we could. So with the art, I look for as many venues as possible that I could expose it, and I share with people my perception of of what I see in the world today. And if that registers with somebody, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it's not. I don't relate to it. I hope I don't relate to it in as ardent a need for attention or approval as I did when I was acting.
Well, I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and I guarantee your artwork could fix up a lot of buildings downtown. I'm going to propose them for you.
Oh, I wish you would. I've been trying to set up a dialogue in Chicago and Detroit, and I would like to get the word out as much as possible. So that's why I had them send you that proposal that you looked at. The little movie of.
Yes, I have it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I have an email addressed to Dan Gilbert, who pretty much resurrected Detroit. I will shoot that forward to him, and that's all I can promise from there.
Well, it's funny, it's funny you should mention that, because just the other day I ran into somebody who knew Dan Gilbert, and I had tried to reach him before through a fellow I became acquainted with, and it ended up falling into that bureaucracy of, we'll give it. it goes to the whoever's in charge of the beautifying the commercial real estate, and then they say, "Well, send it to us, and we'll put it in our pile. We'll let you know if we respond to it." And I find that for really for pieces that really resonate, and that the artist has to have created it out of some kind of passion, and for the viewer, or in this instance, the person who's going to put it up on that big wall, they have to be in touch with a similar passion. It's not a question of, "Oh yeah, this would be a good painting, let's do this one." It's like, "Oh, I really feel that. That message really is interesting to me. I'd like to see that big." So for instance, I have a painting that I did that I'm looking for exposure for it, but it's a painting I did of a rattlesnake wrapped around 2 gold ingots from Fort Knox, and in the shape of a dollar sign.
Oh.
And it's looking right at you, And the title of the piece used to be Greed. And then I took it because I entered into a poster contest here in Los Angeles, and I made it into a poster, and then the poster says, "In greed we trust. Give me your tired, your poor, your money. Give me your dreams, your hopes, your money. Give me your sons, your daughters, your money, and I'll give you your inalienable rights for a little money." And it says, "Now playing in your homes, places of business, worship and play, restricted, under 17 required, blah, 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 blah." So I made it into a movie poster.
That's fantastic.
But that's something, the message of that, in greed we trust, and the reality that we've built a society that, speaks about all these lofty philosophical and, these dreams, but it really also functions as an opportunity to make capitalism and the need to become successful in terms of how much money you make or how much you accomplish as the yardstick. And we're seeing the fruits of it right now in our society. People are there's a huge disparity between those that have money and those that don't.
No, it's an interesting time we live in. Like I said, I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm a stand-up comedian, so I travel the country, and I see every walks of life and every bubble everyone lives in, and there's such a disconnect from everybody. And like you said, in greed we trust. That's something that's I think I saw that saying in a Rage Against the Machine video. I mean, there's such a disconnect from the rich to the poor.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. Years ago, I was in Paris, and I was walking down the street, and I saw this bookstore. It was a Polish bookstore. And in the window were all these fascinating paintings and drawings. And they were posters. And the reason is that the Polish, for a long time, weren't able to, dissent against their government.
I'm a quarter Polish.
So the Poles, who are considered I don't mean this in a disparaging way,
no.
The poor cousins of the French. The Polish artists would make these posters and put them up on buildings in the middle of the night, because it was their way of protesting. There was a way of getting the word out, letting people know that they weren't alone in their issues. And so, this particular poster that I made, "In Greed We Trust," it really, the intention is to let people, put them in touch with the fact that, we have grown up with a philosophy and a Bill of Rights, which unfortunately has excluded so many people and hurt so many people. And I think that while it sounds good on paper, we don't really follow it in our day-to-day business and our work, and the way we choose to help or not help our fellow human beings.
You know, I just moved out of Los Angeles. I was living in Sherman Oaks. What part are you living in these days?
Well, I'm living just outside of Venice, but I'm trying to get out too. I've lived all over LA, and it's interesting. I think I'd probably be happier in a smaller town or a city. LA's become, it's become a bigger city.
It's unbelievable, the homeless population there. You go under the 110, it's unbelievable how much homeless is out there, especially in Venice.
Right. I think that one of the reasons why homelessness is so much more obvious out here is because the climate allows more people to sleep outside.
Yeah, they're like professional campers.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So it's a shame. It's really a shame. But, again, these people have a voice. And so that's interesting. I'll send you this poster. I'll email it to you. What's your email address?
It's Chad.
Oh, yeah.
I'll actually, I have your email. I'll email you, and you can just shoot it right back.
Okay.
And I tell you what, I'll put the poster up when I post this on the description so people can see.
All right.
If that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so people can get a visual element of it. Before I let you go, I just want to ask: Are you done with acting and directing too? Are you full on?
Well, I'm not. The saying, "I'll always be an actor." I mean, that's the first thing I learned to do was to act.
We'll be seeing you in a full beard again, like Ray Donovan.
Well, I had a full beard when I did Fiddler. When I played Tevye. That was probably the best role I've ever played next to Starsky. I mean, it was similar to Starsky in a lot of ways because Tevye can be so many different things. He can be, silly, serious, stupid. He can do all the colors. If it's a good role, if it's a good role, then acting can be a lot of fun. Directing was something that I found myself interested in more and more as I worked in front of the camera, because in film and in television, the actor is just a small piece of the process. But when you're a director, as I mentioned earlier, you have all these creative avenues, all these ways to experience yourself creatively, if that's what kind of a director you are. And so, so the problem is that in our society, ageism being what it is, young people work their way up into that position in the bureaucracies, like the movie studios, and they don't want to hire people that may know a little more than they do or have more experience than they do. There's a lot of ego involved when you're doing such a visual thing as film and television. That's a lot of people want to become stars, even if they're not actors and directors. So getting someone to hire you as a director when you're older is more difficult, which doesn't make much sense because so many of the stuff you see on television and on film is not directed well and could be much better. But that's the way of the world.
Well, that's probably why you probably like being an artist, is just because, like, I'm a stand-up comic. I don't have anyone to answer to, producers, nobody. I can just do it myself, and you're
exactly.
And that's the beauty of it.
Exactly. It's you'll do something interesting if someone if someone enjoys it, great. If they don't, well, I enjoy doing it.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you one more, then I'll let you get going. I got to ask you this. When you reprised your role as David Starsky in 2004 for the movie with Ben Stiller and reunited with David Soul, was it kind of a surreal situation to be in again, just doing that iconic role years later in a big-budget film?
Yeah, I guess it was. It was enough years later that it was more of a curiosity. Unfortunately, the director, had his own ideas about the film and about who we were. At one point, I had said to Ben, I said, "Hey, here's a great idea. Let's do such and such." And without missing a beat, the director said, "I don't think you'd do that."
Todd Phillips?
Yeah. So, it was a hell of a ride. It was a hell of a ride, and I really appreciate my relationship with David in terms of how much we, how much we've stayed in contact.
That's cool to hear, because you hear about these partners, these people that work together, they end up hating each other. The fact that you're still friends, that's a great thing to hear.
Yeah, well, I think that, as I mentioned earlier, every relationship has many, many, many colors and many sides. But I deal with it. I basically, David and I are like brothers. And, I care for him, he cares for me. And, maybe someday there'll be some kind of a vehicle where we can play with our chemistry again.
Yeah, that would be great to kind of bring that back somehow in a different situation.
Yeah, it would be.
Okay, well, I got to tell you this before I let you go. If I were to tell you, as a young boy sitting on my grandfather's lap watching Starsky and Hutch, and I would be talking to you in 2020, I think my grandpa would be proud, and it's a very surreal moment, and I really do thank you for your time.
Well, you're very kind, and I appreciate the fact that you enjoyed our work and that you still enjoy it.
To this day,
I'm going to send you this poster, and like that.
That sounds awesome. Where can people find you? I know you're on Instagram. I don't know if you're private. I know people can find your work at pmglazerart.com, but where can people follow you?
Well, my son takes care of my Instagram account, and I occasionally write. I used to do it much more faithfully. I used to write a blog on Facebook in my dog's voice.
All right.
And which was fun. And so I go on Facebook occasionally, not as much as I used to, which was not much at all then. And so if people want to reach me, they can do either the Facebook, I guess, the Instagram. Although I'm just not. I'm what I call computer challenged.
I gotcha. I gotcha.
So I'm. It's like, what's that ringing? Oh, it's my phone. Where's my phone? It's in my pocket. Oh, okay, I got it. So, anyways, but if someone really needs to reach me, they can reach me.
Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. This was an absolute pleasure. I wish you nothing but health and happiness. And
thank you.
If you ever move out of Venice, best of luck to you, and hang in there.
You do the same. How's things in Cleveland? You're not from Cleveland. You're from Cleveland, but you're not in Cleveland.
Yeah, I'm from Cleveland. I'm living in New York now because as a stand-up comic, it just seems a little bit more better for the landscape for what I do.
That's true.
And I was
listening.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I actually used to perform right in Venice, the Venice Underground. It's like right where they have a Wednesday night show there. I'd go there every Wednesday to perform.
How cool.
Yeah.
That's I love that. One of my favorite things is Sirius Radio.
Yes.
Classic Radio with Channel 148.
Mm-hmm.
And they have all the old shows. You know, they have Bing Crosby, and they have Gracie Allen, and George Burns, and Jack Benny, and they have all these amazing shows. And it's so interesting to listen to humor.
Yeah.
The way it was as opposed to humor the way it is. Because nowadays, humor is not so much storytelling as some kind of, a scatological window into a person's personal life.
Right.
But, there used to be more of a tradition of a good joke with a good setup. Like, I'll tell you one.
Okay.
On the podcast.
Absolutely.
This old couple, they go to the doctor, the fertility doctor. Now, they're in their late 70s, early 80s, and the doctor says, I don't understand. What do you want? And the woman says, we want to do artificial insemination. He says, oh, you want to do in vitro? She says, yes, well, in vitro, fine. He says, you're in your 70s, early 80s. She says, listen, doctor, we've discussed this, and this is what we want. So he says, okay, all right, and he hands him a jar. He says, you go in the other room. Give me a sample of your husband's sperm. So she goes in the other room, and 20 minutes later, there's a knock on the door, and she sticks her head in the door, and she says, doctor, can I see you? And he says, sure, come in. She says, I try everything. I try with my mouth, I try with my hand, I try with the back of my elbow, I try with the back of my knee. I can't get the lid off. And that kind of misdirection in storytelling is just so delicious because you never see it coming.
Right. That's classic misdirection.
Yeah, exactly.
I gotta let you go on this. I got the opportunity. You know Rich Little, obviously.
Yeah.
I got to do a gig with Rich Little, and I got to talk to him about the old time Hollywood, old time show business, and and he was telling me about when he would fill in for Johnny Carson, and I guess Johnny tried stand up a few times, and he was just absolutely terrible at it.
Right.
From what Rich was telling me, and it was just funny because this guy was on TV for so long, but he was actually terrible at stand up.
Well, what's funny for me about that is that's one of the shows I did not go on. And the reason I did not go on it was that Johnny didn't think I was funny enough.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Silly.
That's silly.
Yeah. But Rich Little was, I was on his show a couple of times, I think.
Oh, yeah. He had his variety show, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. That's so cool. Well, listen,
all right, kiddo.
I could talk to you all day, but listen, thank you so much. We'll see you soon, and send me that poster.
I'll do it. Send me your email.
All right. Thank you so much. Paul Michael Glaser, everybody.